Being a chartered manager means that you are a specialist in that area, and it means you've got all the skills to do the job to the best of its ability.
You are seen as a leader, a true leader who has credentials behind the great work you've already been doing.
It's enhanced my understanding, it's enhanced my skill set, it's improved my mindset.
It makes all the difference.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Hello and welcome along to this Chartered Management Consultant Masterclass. I'm Matt Roberts, I'm the Director of Membership and Professional Development at CMI, and I'm delighted today to be joined by three newly chartered management consultants who I'll introduce you to shortly. Today's a session that's designed to help you understand as much as possible about the process of becoming chartered. And so whilst I'll interview our recently successful chartered consultants to get their thoughts on the process for them, it's a great opportunity for you to pose questions to us. So if you have questions, please type them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we possibly can later in the session. Okay, so look, without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our guests. So we have Katie Carter from BAE Systems, Harry Barriam from Atkins Realis, and Ajay Gupta from Amy Consulting. Guys, welcome along. Thank you very much for giving us your time today to join this session. And firstly, congratulations. You all became Chartered Management Consultants over the last 3 months. And I'm sure you've had plenty of people congratulate you, but I wanted to make sure that I did the same today. And I'm sure those that are watching will pass on their congratulations too. We're going to start with a bit of an introduction actually to the routes via which you became chartered. So it's really neat and tidy today. We've got 3 guests with us, all of whom became chartered through a slightly different route of assessment. So Katie at BAE Systems, I know that you were part of the accredited program pathway to becoming chartered. Ajay, you came through the experienced professional route. And Harry, also experienced professional, but with the depth interview assessment method, where a slightly shorter written submission is offset by a longer professional discussion. And we'll come on to some of those differences and some of the experiences that you had during your assessments as we talk a little bit later on. But for those watching today, if you've got questions around particular assessment routes, I wanted you to be aware that we've got people with a variety of experiences here for you today. Okay, so look, I'm really looking forward to getting your thoughts today, guys, on the experiences that you've had. And I think just to sort of kick us off, becoming chartered is something that a lot of people take very seriously. It's something that you want to make sure that you prepare for well, and of course you're looking for that successful outcome that you guys have all achieved. I'd like to just get a bit of a feeling from each of you about how you went about preparing for the assessment. So thinking right back to before you'd started putting pen to paper on the written piece, what was in your mind about how you were going to approach this? And Katie, let's kick off with you.
Sure. So I think timing is quite key. I was quite lucky in that I decided to go forward with my chartership not that long after applying for and achieving promotion. So I was already in that mode of hoarding feedback and thinking quite carefully about what I've been doing and why, and looking at competency frameworks. And it's certainly the case in my company. It's probably the same in other firms, that our competency framework aligns quite closely with the Chartered MC competency. So I had the opportunity to kind of reuse some of that thinking and obviously just adapt it and add to it where I needed to. So I would say timing is quite key. There's always those kind of internal processes that we go through, such as promotion or sort of annual performance rounds, that use some of that same kind of thinking and methodology. I
think that's really good advice, because nobody that I meet within the industry is telling me that they've got loads of time on their hands. So I think anything that you can do to find those efficiencies and see where you can utilize stuff that's been prepared for another purpose, we want you to do that. It doesn't have to be a case of completely reinventing the wheel. As long as you're providing evidence that helps to demonstrate how you're performing against the criteria, then it's a legitimate part of what you're producing. Thanks, Katie. Harry, what about you? How did you go about this?
For us, it was suggested to me by my senior management that I should try for the chartered management consultancy, the chartership. So we had a few colleagues who had done the similar chartership a few months before me. So I had the fortune to consult many of them. So they were very helpful in the sense they gave me the the two pathways, which are the experience one, the one, and the in-depth interview. And since I was working on mostly from a client location, I had to do the in-depth one because then you need not spend as much time as you are doing in the other pathway. So basically, the colleagues helped me a lot with their feedback, and they were really helpful in making sure that the essay touched on all the points that are critical. And I, of course, went through the website, and the FAQs were really useful for me in the CMI website. And some YouTube videos, of course, that I had to see and then understand the in-depth interview because I know that's going to be the most important part of my process. So yeah, so those were my basic preparation.
That's great. That ability to sort of gain insights from colleagues that have been through the process is really important. For many people working in firms, that will be the case. There'll be already, if you like, a little network of champions, people who've already gone through the process. As Harry points out, though, if you're not in that position, perhaps you're an independent consultant, or maybe you're the first person in your organisation that's going to become chartered, there's a whole sort of guidance suite available for you once you register for the assessment, and it incorporates videos from people that have been through the process. And there's a back catalogue of similar masterclasses to this event today that I'd encourage you to take a look at, in order to, I guess, just immerse yourself in how best to prepare for them. But Ajay, down to get you involved in the conversation. What about you? What was useful for you in terms of the way you approached it?
So thank you, Matt. I think for me, it was one of the master classes that I attended. So I think Chartered the Management Institute collaborated with Amy, and they presented, what the institute offers. And I think some of the ideas presented there kind of resonated well with me. I was a people manager. Like you said, I came through the experienced professional route. So I kind of, going through that session, I realized that these are a lot of things that I have done in the past and I've been doing. And then, the idea of excellence, transparency, impact, and all those things that I stand for, the values that I kind of strive for, is something that the institute promotes. And that were my real motivators, and that kind of gave me the idea that why not become associated with other people of the community and of the network. And that was my basically the motivation to start. And like I said, introspection was was I think the major tip. I would say, like Katie pointed out, timing. I would say introspection, because when you're on an experienced professional route, I think you have a 7 years of minimum experience that you need to demonstrate. So thinking about your 7 year or 7 year plus journey and finding the right examples to code, building the storyline is, I think, is key. And understanding how to align them with the um, framework, I would say, is very important.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ajay. That's great to understand. It's a nice segue actually into my next question, really, which is around, how did you find the written piece, and what were the challenging aspects of that? Perhaps you can share some advice for the audience on that. And Ajay, can you pick up where you left off there, because you were, I think, just about on the cusp of
Sure.
covering that.
So written writing some things down, I think I find it challenging, and for many reasons. Sometimes my thoughts are scattered, here and there, and so many stories to tell, and I have a lot to tell. And the most challenging aspect of the application was the word limit to me, because there were a lot of things to tell, but in a very brief passage. One of the things that I kind of helped with my prep was I kept a note, either a phone app or a physical pen and paper, and I kept thinking whenever I had a thought about, oh, this is an example I could go, oh, this is a value system that kind of I can provide an example for. I could write that down. My first draft was probably very messy and a very long, bullet point of ideas. Oh, this is what I want to discuss. And I think the final advice would be we need to be very, very strict and ruthless with the drafts. I think we want to write a lot, but I think we need to figure out which one, or refine it to a point uh, which is the right, which strikes the right chords. I think is very important. So that filtration process, for someone who's coming from an experienced background route, is, I think, is key. Is something that you need to very, think about. And the thing is, you can use a lot of your examples in a there are a lot of opportunities to demonstrate it, I would say. So spreading them out on various sections of the application is also important. So you'll have fantastic examples, but to position them within the application is also a very important aspect. So I think, um, have a bank of examples, and then read the questions and try to map it to them.
That's great advice, Ajay. And I just want to assure you, we're not alone by feeling that challenge of needing to be succinct. I think what I would say for the audience benefit is that all of our assessors are chartered management consultants themselves. So they are steeped in consultancy. They have their stories to tell. So if you feel that by being succinct, you might not be covering the full context, rest assured that the person reading that application has got plenty of experience in the industry. But yeah, you're not the first person to mention that word limit. Again, on the application guidance, we're really clear about how many words you've got for each piece that's within there. Katie, what about you? How did you get on with the written piece?
I found it really challenging. I'm going to be honest. It is quite lengthy. I think I wrote more for mine than I did for my undergraduate dissertation. So it's a very thorough assessment, and rightly so, because it is looking at all different aspects of what it means to be a consultant. So I really like the way Ajay described that as kind of mapping your evidence to the right competency. What I found a little bit tricky was some of the competencies on a first glance look quite similar. So I use the sort of self-assessment tool, which is like an Excel sheet that splits out all the competencies and the kind of evidence at your level. And I kind of wrote down briefly, well, I'll use this example for that and that example for this. But as I started to write them up more fully, I started to tease out actually the differences between those competencies, which are quite subtle. And my advice would be, try and read the whole thing before you start writing, because it's quite frustrating if you think you know what the competency is about and you write a whole example and then you get 3/4 of the way through the form and then you think, oh, actually that example would have been better down here, and you end up having to redo it. So do give a good thorough scan first, plan what you're going to say, and maybe talk it through with your manager or somebody else who's done the chartered program, just to make sure that you've interpreted the competencies correctly.
Yeah, really good advice again. Absolutely. One of the things that I'll just sort of mention to the audience right now, and Katie, this might not be of much consolation to you, unfortunately, but the on-program route, we've recently made some changes actually to the assessment piece around the written application, really because we've now had 4 or 5 years of people coming through the process, plenty of experiences to sort of take a look at, and there was a section actually that we've been able to reduce down, so that dissertation that you wrote, has helped sort of ease the path a little bit for people that come next on that process going forwards. But brilliant advice, taking a look through what's required of you before you start committing to writing, so that you don't end up potentially wasting any time during the process. Harry, you did the depth interview. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, that involves an abbreviated written piece and the extended discussion. How did you find that? Do you feel that the balance in terms of the written versus the discussion was about right, or any challenges on that written piece?
To be honest, I put in as much effort to write a good essay, even though the word limit was, I believe, a bit less. But still, I think the first question was the most difficult for me, the making the case for your chartership. So, and it's a structured essay, and as I can completely agree with Katie, that it's very difficult to write something that once you're out of your college, it's completely different in the sense you're good at writing reports, but writing about yourself and writing these essays, it was quite difficult for me. But so I just sat down one afternoon and just started typing. And of course, yes, the the guidance on there was a PDF that I downloaded from CMI, which sort of gives you a very good guidance on how you can structure these essays. That was invaluable for me, without which I wouldn't have written as good essay as I did. So that sort of guided me, and the competencies which are the CMI competencies also helped you sort of frame your answers in such a way that you make a case for yourself, and that was the biggest and that was the toughest question that I had to answer. Rest of them were pretty straightforward, to be honest, but once you write the first one, then it sort of becomes easier for you to answer the next 2-3 questions. So yeah, the first one was the most difficult and the most time I spent answering to.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, one of the things that a number of people have fed back on in the past is that it's unusual to have to write or speak just about yourself and your own achievements. We're probably more used to talking about teams we've been part of and the overall achievements of those teams. I think one thing just to really get across to the audience is just think about this particular award is about you and the impact that you make. So what the assessors are looking for is for you to talk about yourself, your achievements, your impact, which can be tough. It can be slightly out of the ordinary to do that, but there are real benefits with the reflection that's required to enable you to do that going forwards. Okay, whilst we're with you, Harry, I mentioned a couple of times that the assessment method that you undertook, the depth interview, involves a longer professional discussion. And for those that are watching that are perhaps not familiar with how Chartered Management Consultant Assessment works, there are 2 parts to it. There's a written piece, which we've just explored. An assessor will take a look at that written application, providing that meets the criteria successfully. Then you'll be invited to a professional discussion that takes place virtually, and that's the opportunity for the assessor to perhaps probe some of the areas of the competencies that weren't covered in so much depth in the written application, just to test a little bit of some of the examples that you've given to see just how robust they are and so forth. So everybody going through the routes that we talked about will have a professional discussion. But Harry's discussion longer because of the abbreviation of the written piece. So Harry, what were your experiences with the professional discussion, and any sort of benefits that came from it, and likewise any challenges that you experienced?
Yeah, certainly. So mine was a 2-hour long professional discussion. And to be very honest, I had prepared. I thought I had prepared well, but I didn't read and I didn't see the Excel sheet that really ranks you into all those the sub competencies that is actually ranked and graded. So I think that was the only miss that I had. It was a very kind of like a freewheeling discussion, but of course it was structured from his side. But to me, it felt we were having a natural conversation about my career. So it was good. I think the only challenging thing, apart from that, not having gone through that Excel sheet, was I believe there are some answers where I thought I gave a good enough answer, but when I saw the final assessment, I could sort of understand that maybe I didn't convince the examiner that I had that competency. It was not that much, like 2 or 3, but I thought I always try innovative approaches in my consulting for clients and for anything. And there was a question on that. I thought I answered it quite okay, but when I saw the answer sheet and it was not rated as C, then I realized that even the feedback that you get from the interview is you really have to be a bit more careful and a bit more effective in the sense. I'm not saying for all of them, but some of the questions. So it was a good feedback in the sense. I was successful. That was great. I mean, it was very happy that we received the result in like a few hours or something. But that not having gone through that Excel sheet was kind of an impediment for me. But very friendly examiner, very kind of freewheeling discussion, and it was really great. I mean, and to reflect on your career journey while having this in-depth professional discussion was something that I really value a lot, because it gives you a perspective that I don't think any interview or any discussion with colleague can give you that. So I'm really thankful for that interprofessional discussion, to have gone through that stage.
That's great to hear, Harry. I'm glad to hear that you had such a positive experience in that way. And yeah, some of what you said is starting to bring some questions through, which we'll come to a little bit later in the discussion. Thanks for those of you that are asking questions. If you've got questions, then don't hesitate to add them to the chat. And as I say, we'll come to them a little bit later on. Ajay, what about you? What was the experience of the professional discussion from your perspective?
So I would say, yeah, in a very similar fashion as Harry described, very, very, very friendly. I think for me, the application covered the what and the hows, but the professional discussion focused on the whys, which I think, given the word length limitation, the whys are not uh, given a chance in the application, I think. And I think this was my chance to talk about the whys. I was quite impressed how in depth the examiner knew and had gone through my application, so which was helping them probe into the whys. Why did I do a certain action? What was the result? So I think the typical situation, task, action, result conversation started free flowing just because the way the questions were structured. And I really enjoyed that, because it's rarely that we get a chance to talk about the details. The only thing I would say is, because I come from a technical background, I was tempted to use a lot of technical jargon at some point, because it's my daily go to dictionary, right? However, I think this was a chance where I had to be careful and be mindful of the audience, like, and put them in a more broader context. I think that was important. So I think it's a fine balance between breadth and depth of your profile that this professional discussion gives you. And the examiner did a fantastic job of making this more of a conversation rather than an like interrogation. And I think that was for me the winning point of it. And I came out of it really feeling confident, and feeling that yes, my submission was correctly received and reviewed.
Great. Really pleased to hear that. I think we'll come back to this point in a moment, but Ajay, you've mentioned an interesting point in my view, at least, that lots of people that come forward for chartered assessment are actually operating in sort of specialist areas. We've got people from the tech sector, the engineering sector, financial services, and so forth. And with that comes sort of specific areas of focus, jargon, as you've mentioned. What we're looking for here is a broader, sort of almost horizontal set of competencies around consultancy. So regardless of the specialism that an individual has, we're looking for those consultancy skills. So I think you're right to touch on that, and we'll come back to that a little bit more in a moment or two. But Katie, what was your experience of the professional discussion?
I found it really challenging, to the extent that I was genuinely surprised to learn that I'd passed. And not because the interviewer was, making it difficult or unpleasant in any way. It was a really nice conversation, but it really did push me into areas that were outside of my comfort zone. So I'd counsel anyone going through it to just be prepared for that and not be thrown by it. So I was advised that I should read through my application before the interview, because it would probably be based around those answers. And some of it was, but I think in my case, I had some sort of competency weaknesses and small gaps, and my assessor had very astutely picked up on those and immediately started asking me questions about things that were a bit outside of my comfort zone and my specialism. And it's ironic that I found this so hard, because I interview people all the time as new consultants coming into the business, but I haven't had to be interviewed for a very long time, so I was very rusty on that. So I would advise anyone going through this to try to practice. If you can find a colleague who's been through this process, who can do like a little mock interview with you, and particularly practice those hypotheticals. So even if you haven't done the thing you're being asked about, ask yourself, how would I do this? Because what the assessor is trying to probe is how you think or what your approach is to problems. It's not always about examples of great things that you've done. It's like, how do you respond to things that you aren't prepared for, that you haven't perhaps encountered in the past?
Great advice. And I'm sort of pleased to hear all of you say that you found the assessor was sort of creating the right environment where it was conversational. What we're really trying to ensure is that that environment is conducive, so that you can really thrive, and that you can get those examples across to the assessor. The way in which the assessment works is designed to ensure that only people who've got the right level of experience come through to the written piece anyway. There is then a check and balance there in terms of assessing the written piece. If that written application doesn't quite hit the criteria, then there's some feedback and the opportunity to resubmit. And so by the time you get to the professional discussion, there's already a level of success that's been achieved. So what we really want to do is just make sure that we're creating an environment where a really great conversation can flow, and the assessor can really be absolutely satisfied that, yes, do you know what, this person has hit these criteria and can be chartered. Great, thank you all for all of your advice on that. As I mentioned a moment ago, Ajay had started to talk about sort of specialisms and so forth, and if most of your working life is spent sort of with clients in a certain particular sort of vertical, for example, then of course it becomes second nature to be using, as you said, Ajay, the sort of dictionary of your day-to-day and so forth. We're looking, as I said a moment ago, for those sort of horizontal sort of consultancy skills, regardless of sector that you're operating in. I just wonder, sort of building on Ajay's point there, whether any of you've got sort of thoughts on how you made sure that you didn't risk just focusing on one sector or becoming too sort of specialised in terms of what you were saying in your applications. Harry, I don't know if you've got any views on that piece.
Yeah. So, I think I can agree with Ajay that you sort of get when you're working in a technical field, you sort of run with that jargon. But for me, it was more about how I connected. It was making a conscious effort really to demonstrate there are these core skill set that you have and you practice, and the industry knowledge that you have is also could be specialized, but that also sort of links with a broader consulting skill set, right? All about learning, adapting, and I think applying that skill set to solve different client problems, and how do you build lasting relationship with clients. So even though you could be highly technical, there are things that you can translate into these consulting competencies, and that's what I've really focused on because of my diverse background. I was working in multiple different sectors. If they could literally read my essay, that some of my projects were in multiple different industries also. So how do we connect that, and how do I give a coherent kind of a picture to the interviewer? It was spinning all these into the competencies, and how as a consultant to my clients did I make a good impact, and how do I help them solve problems, and also because at my level there is a business building aspect to all the consulting projects I do. So I think that's something that I really consciously practiced and put together, so that you're not just seen as a specialist consultant or a very technical manager. You also have to have that broader understanding of what you're bringing to the table in terms of consulting skill set.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. Katie, any builds on what Harry has said?
So I think for me, I use quite a lot of internal pieces of work as examples of breadth. So if you're part of a consulting firm or some sort of larger construct, I'm sure there are lots of things you do which aren't just sort of delivering to clients as we do for most of our time. So whether it's being a people manager or being part of an employee resource group, doing academic outreach, or maybe kind of academic partnering for research or things like that, all of the stuff that you do outside of your kind of day-to-day client work is really valuable, and that's part of making us a really well-rounded consultant. So particularly where you've done a piece of work that you've led or that's been quite impactful for your firm or your organization, or perhaps the wider sector that you consult into, that's really good evidence, and try and bring that through. So don't think it all has to be about just the work that we do for clients.
Excellent, thank you very much. Good stuff. Okay, so look, just thinking about one or two final questions before we throw this open to the audience. And if you are watching today, please do type your questions into the chat, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. But sort of thinking back now in reflection, so 2-3 months after getting the good news that you're chartered, thinking back to when you were starting your application, knowing what you know now, would you do anything differently? What advice would you give to somebody in similar shoes at this stage? And let's start with you, Ajay, on this one, please.
Sure, Matt. I think my top advice would be, don't see this as a certificate. See this as a journey. This is a development journey. It's a chance for you to reflect on your achievements, on the ways of working, and it's a chance for you to express that and document that. So use this as a opportunity to reflect on all of that, and and summarize it. It's a chance for you to articulate all the work you have done in a succinct manner, like we have discussed earlier. So I would say the motivation has to come from the core value structure, right? And that has really helped me. And if I would still go with the same advice if I mean when I started my application. One of the other things I would say is read the question very carefully. The question is long worded, but if you break it down and try to address all components of it, the answer will reveal itself. So I think that really worked for me. So that is my takeaway from the process.
Thanks, Ajay. Katie?
Yeah, I'd really echo that. I think it is a good thing to try and build up over time. So I rather than thought, oh, I've got a gap between projects, I'll fill in my chartership application without really an appreciation of how in-depth it was going to be. I think a better way of doing it would be to start much earlier and just kind of chip away at it. And as you're gathering those examples, write them down, because you'd be amazed how much you forget about the detail of what you've been doing after the fact. So you can kind of gather and build that evidence over a period of time. And then when you're ready to go forward, then you can kind of finish it off. But I wouldn't assume that you'll just sit down for 2 days and write it. It's a bit too much to approach it in that way.
Good advice again. Harry, what about you?
For me, it was just as I probably alluded to a bit in my experience about the interview. It was just that you put in so much effort to write a good essay, and then you make an elementary mistake of not reading through that those competency framework details. Like, for instance, the innovation. There was a clear two points about that. So I think it's all about preparation, and that you know at this level you have the capability to achieve that. But it's all about showcasing that, and that too within the time frame, and you don't even get more than one chance in the interview. So taking that as a very serious feedback, in the sense that you have to understand that it's a structured process, but also that you have to sort of adapt your whole of your background, whole of your skill set, whole of your learnings from the industry into that framework. And the more you practice and the more you understand these framework and the details of that, and the more you think about it, the better it is. And trust me, once you have that in the bag, the interview will be, because I went through that in-depth interview process, I can talk about that, and it will be a much better experience and than what I had. Even though I enjoyed it and I was happy that I cleared it, but that's my only tip. If at all, if I advise any colleague who's going through this, that's the only advice I would probably give.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for your advice, your tips, and your thoughts so far today. We're going to turn to some questions that we've had from our audience now. I know we've given people the opportunity to pre-submit questions ahead of time, and I can see we've also had some live questions coming in through the chat as we've been talking today. So we'll work through a number of those now. We'll try to get through as many as we possibly can. Perhaps we can start with a pre-submitted question. I know that VJ submitted this question for us. So Vijay asked what to expect in the new ChMC associate application, which is much shorter. In a shorter application form, how to still showcase the demonstration of all the ChMC skills required. Thanks very much for the question, Vijay, and I'll just give a little bit of background explainer on some aspects of the question. So I mentioned earlier on, after Katie had talked us through the challenges she had with the written application, that we've made some changes to the way that some of our assessment methods work. This is on the back of what we've learned from the first 1,500 people that became chartered management consultants over recent years. So we made a number of changes, one being that actually some of our experience requirements could be slightly reduced. So to come forward for assessment as an experienced professional now, we're looking at 5 years rather than 7 years, which has been a very popular change that we've made, but also something that we thought very clearly about based on a large sample of data and the feedback of organisations we're working with, existing chartered consultants and our assessors. We also have, as part of that sort of set of changes, made some adjustments to the accredited programme route that Katie followed. So rather than needing 5 years of experience there to come forward for assessment, those on an accredited programme, which is where CMI has worked with the organisation to really scrutinise the developmental pathways, skills development, experience gathering processes that an individual has within that organisation, to map them to the criteria we're looking for chartered management consultant, and therefore be assured that people following that programme will be ready for their assessment at the end of that period. And that's now a 4-year period. And we have also slightly tweaked the application there. So the actual written application is now aligned with what's required of experienced professionals rather than what was a longer application form in the past. So bad luck, Katie, on that one, but timing is everything. And you know, the feedback that you've given was also shared by others earlier in the process ahead of that review. Now, to come to your question at long last, Vijay. So Vijay is asking about the associate application. So one of the things that we make available for those that are on the accredited pathway that I referred to a moment ago is the opportunity to become an associate chartered management consultant. And that opportunity is now available after 2 years of experience. Now, this looks at an assessment of competencies against what we call our applied level criteria. So within the competency framework, which defines all of the criteria for chartered management consultant, we actually have a number of levels of criteria. The highest level being chartered, which is what our 3 guests today have been assessed against. To become an associate chartered management consultant, we're assessing against the applied level of criteria. All of these criteria are publicly available on the CMI website, and we'll post a link to that shortly. So you can take a look at the criteria, and the way in which they evolve is designed to reflect the types of experience and responsibility that you're likely to have taken at various stages of your career. So the associate assessment is at that 2-year period for those on an accredited programme. And we've made some changes there with the application to bring that into line with the level of depth that we're going to with experienced professionals and on programme people, but against those applied criteria. And Vijay, I hope that what you've heard from the guys around the written piece has been really helpful in terms of that need to prepare well. So take a look through the entirety of the form before you start writing, get familiar with where you'll be able to utilise different examples, avoid wasting some time that way, utilise the guidance that we're providing, have conversations with others that have gone through the process before, but ultimately just be mindful that word count is there for a reason. Being able to write succinctly is a skill, and then there's the opportunity to elaborate when you come to the professional discussion. So hopefully some of what we talked about earlier has helped to answer that question. Sorry, that's a very long-winded answer. Okay, so going to some of the questions we've had from the live audience. Thanks very much to Yi Huan Lim. You've posted 2 questions for us, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Apologies if I'm not. So in terms of the requirements and the competencies that you're required to demonstrate, as I've just mentioned in response to Vijay's question, the competency framework, which is the document in which we define all of the criteria, is publicly available, and we'll post a link to where you can find that shortly, and it'll also be available in the follow-up communications. That document is designed to help you immerse yourself gradually in what it is that we're looking for. So there's some nice visuals there that cover a number of almost domains of criteria. So how you interact with clients, how you're looking after your own CPD, those sorts of things are all covered within that. And then you can drop down into greater levels of detail. And you'll see there's just over 50 competencies within there that are what we're really looking for you to be able to demonstrate as part of your application and assessment. Harry, you referred to the competencies a number of times, and Katie, you too, in terms of just being able to sort of check that, yeah, I think I'm covering all of this in the right areas. I don't know if you wanted to make any further reference to your experience there.
I think using the self-assessment materials that are provided is a really helpful way of, well, first of all, just checking, am I ready to go through this now, or should I leave it a little bit of time until I've got more experience? But it also really helps with that evidence mapping that we spoke about. So you will have in your head, or maybe even written down, that bank of examples of the best stuff that you've done. Try just plotting it out against the competencies, because there are quite a lot of them. Some of them feel quite similar, and you might find yourself wanting to reuse examples. Which is fine, but you might need to split out different aspects of those examples to make sure they're relevant. So do use those materials. They're really very good, and they help me a lot.
Great stuff. Harry, any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, the CMI material is super helpful. Please do spend time to go through that, and it will really help you craft a very good essay, and also be of very help to your interview preparation.
Great stuff. Okay, and Ajay, just while we've got you, any thoughts from you on that one?
No, I mean, I think it's mostly covered. Just one thing that helped me was, I think, competencies. The document you're referring to actually breaks them down further, and I think that breakdown really helped me. So at the top level, it might seem a bit daunting, but if you look at the breakdown, that breakdown really makes a complete story. And I think to study those sub parts is very important. So that's my top advice there.
Great, thank you very much. And Hee Wan has asked a further question in follow-up to that, which is really around how the scoring works and how people pass and so forth. Harry referred to this a little bit actually in terms of the feedback received alongside the result. So I mentioned a moment ago that we have a number of different levels of criteria, and for each of the competencies, the assessor is basically looking to check whether the individual applicant is meeting the criteria at each of those three levels. And for the full chartered assessment, which our three guests have all successfully passed, they'll mark that competency with a C for chartered level being reached. A would be applied, and F would be foundation, which is the earlier stage where people are typically at the very early days of their consultancy career. And so that's the way in which the scoring works. We do have a rubric in terms of the way in which we work out whether someone's passed. I'm not actually going to publicize that, I'm afraid, because that is a sort of confidential piece. But what we're not looking for necessarily is that every single competency must be demonstrated to the chartered level, but the majority of them absolutely as part of this. So the assessment methodology is designed to accept that people will have different levels of experiences and so forth, but we're looking to absolutely put a floor of quality in there that people must reach before they could be deemed to pass and be a chartered management consultant. I hope that's a useful explanation of the process insofar as I can. Last question we've got from the audience is from Mahmoud Said. Mahmoud is a finance director in Egypt. Good to have you with us today. Thanks for watching. You're working for a multinational manufacturing group, and you're interested about perhaps how the ChMC standards could align to your cost management. I think, as Katie certainly touched on, one of the things that a lot of the consultancy firms that we're working with have done is to embed the ChMC standards alongside the way in which things like annual appraisals work and sort of in-house sort of competencies are measured. And so that is one use case that's very commonly sort of in place with the organisations that we're working with. I've not particularly heard people mention that they would use this to align to sort of cost management strategies. That said, as I have mentioned, the documentation is there online to take a look at. And so you may well find, sort of looking through that there are relevant sort of competencies that help to define what good looks like that you could well find of use to embed in that way. But I wouldn't necessarily say that's the sort of core purpose of expecting organisations to use this for. I don't know any of the panelists whether you would have a view on that particular question from Mahmood.
I mean, I can only add to that, Matt. I think it can have like a secondary impact if you do go through the competency framework. If you do apply the principles of operational excellence and the whole foundation of the ChMC framework, I think that could have a cost implication in the longer run. And I think it does have, because it's shaping your people, it's shaping your organization, it's moving in that direction where you will achieve that efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Really good point. Thanks, Ajay.
And I think for I work in the Middle East, so maybe a bit more. I can sort of say that this will sort of give you a lot of exposure into some of the best practices and the benchmarks as to what are the good kind of skill set to have to succeed in this field, and it will give you, irrespective of what you work on, it'll be very useful, even from a career perspective, and also to sort of excel in your even your journey as to promotion and anything. So, and it also signals your competency in front of a client. So putting that effort, especially at a good stage in your career, will also be helpful from that perspective too. So there are a lot of benefits, irrespective of which industry and which region you're in.
Fantastic. Thanks, Harry. Excellent. So we're getting some nice feedback from those that are on the call today. Thank you very much for joining us, those that have been watching live. You'll see in the links that we've posted, there's a link to details about how to become a chartered management consultant. You'll find on that page a link to the competency framework document that we've referred to a number of times. But once again, thank you very much for joining us. And look, Katie, Harry, Ajay, congratulations once again on becoming chartered. But a big thank you from me, from all at CMI, and I'm sure I can thank you on behalf of the audience for sharing your insights today. It's been incredibly useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.